Hi, everyone. Very welcome to this very special, very late live stream that we put up because we have just received the interim report regarding the tragic crash of Air India Flight 171. So my name is Peter Hörnfeldt. You're watching this on either Mentor Now or Captains Speaking. We're transmitting it on both channels. And together with me, I have...
Ben Watts, welcome everybody. This is, I say, very breaking, very last minute. I was literally teaching in the simulator, walked in the door when Petter phoned me, saw the preliminary report, and we're going to break this down for you together in real time.
So the idea here is that we have the report. The report is publicly available. We're going to link to it in the description once this video is done. But we're going to go through it now, and we're going to discuss all of the things and what they mean, basically. So this is the first piece of the puzzle. This is not the last piece of the puzzle. But I have to say, from having read the report, that it is extremely comprehensive for being a preliminary report. It includes a lot of information, a lot of data that will partially explain it, even though we don't have the exact picture of what happened. But now we know much, much more. And this is official documentation that we're talking about now. So without further ado, let's dig into the report, shall we?
Let's do it. Yeah, let's go through.
Yeah. So this is a report that is about 15 pages long, and you need to... Basically, it starts off like all of these reports do, which is a foreword that talks about who has made this report, why is this report made, what's the thought behind it. It doesn't give any information as such, but it becomes interesting pretty quickly here.
Yeah.
So the general information follows. This is all the information you need to know about, for example, how many people were on board, extent of injuries, the owner and the operator of the aircraft, and so on. And it gives a short background. This is what happened. So we are, at this point, we kind of know this accident happened on the 12th of June, 2025 at about 8:09 UTC in the morning. And it happened immediately after takeoff. So, no news there, really. But then it goes into talking about who has been taking part in the investigation, which is super important to know that this is a joint effort from both the NTSB from the USA, the FAA from the USA, but of course also the Indian authorities, which are the ones that are leading this, the AAIB and also the DGCA.
Yeah.
So not much more of any substance there. Injuries to persons, fatalities, 12 crew members, 229 passengers, and 19 people on the ground. So that's been confirmed now. And serious injuries, we have one. That's the lone survivor of the accident. But there's also 67 severe or serious injuries on the ground.
Correct. Now, one thing I noticed on there as well, so it talks about how both pilots were based at Mumbai. They'd arrived on the previous day. They'd had adequate rest, so there's no issue with rest there. And the co-pilot was pilot flying on that particular sector. And they arrived at the airport and they underwent a breath analyzer test at 6:25 in the morning, and they were both found fit to operate. So that rules out anything underlying there as well.
Yeah. And it's worth keeping in mind that it was the first officer that was pilot flying here as we get towards the conclusions towards the end, or at least towards the flight data recorder information.
Yeah.
But anyway, the aircraft, now it starts to get really interesting here. So the aircraft is 787-8. It was manufactured in 2013. So it has a good, 12 years on its back. For being a 787, it's a relatively old aircraft. It had 41,868 hours on the airframe. So it's been working hard. The engine type is a General Electric GEnx. We also knew that. And the really important thing that we want to point out here is that it appears that it has been inspected, it's been going through the maintenance exactly according to schedule. So no issues when it comes to the maintenance of the aircraft, which has been a lot of speculations out there about, could this have been poor maintenance, whatever. They seem to have been following all of the maintenance checks in the sequence that should have been done. So that's super important to point out here.
Yeah. There were a couple of outstanding MEL items, but they were very limited and pretty minor.
Yeah, so MEL, minimum equipment list, these are items that are deemed okay, even though they're not working properly, providing that the aircraft still, follows all of the other procedures that the MEL will outline when you have something that doesn't work properly. It's safe to fly with these, and they had nothing to do with the engines and nothing to do with the fuel switches and what. So
correct.
So they're there, but they don't mean anything in this context. Good. So going on then, this is something that I think is going to get a lot of attention from the press, all right, and probably from people out there on the internet as well, and that's because the report talks about a special airworthiness information bulletin. The number is NM 1833, which was issued on December 17th, 2018. So, 7 years ago. That talks about the potential disengagement of the fuel control switch locking feature. Specifically, this airworthiness bulletin talked about 737 fuel switches, but they are more or less identical to the ones that are being used on the 787. But even though they talk about this, right, it's also very clearly laid out that when this airworthiness information bulletin, right, it's not an airworthiness directive, it's an information bulletin. When that came out, it was not considered an unsafe condition. And the FAA sent out some recommended inspections that could be done on these switches, but they were not mandatory. And it doesn't look like Air India did them on this aircraft. So that is obviously going to raise some questions. Well, if there was an issue with this and it wasn't checked, is there a possibility? Ben?
Yeah, we can't say for sure, can we, at this stage? It's to do with the fuel control switch, so there's nothing, we can't eliminate it completely until we see the full report. But,
no, but there's a
two-step,
Nothing dangerous has happened in this context earlier, right? In this last 7 years, there's not been any engine shutdown due to this. If it would have happened, we would have seen much more stringent information coming out, and potentially an airworthiness directive that would have directed this to be a mandatory check, but it hasn't, right?
And if it did happen, it would be one engine. It's not going to be two in quick succession.
Correct. So the chance of something like this causing a dual engine failure within a second of each other is non-existent.
No.
So we cannot completely rule it out. That's why they probably put it into the report. But it's minuscule.
Incredibly unlikely.
Very, very unlikely. But we needed to talk about it anyway because there's definitely going to be discussions about it.
Yeah.
What follows after that is a description of the damages. Obviously, the aircraft was destroyed. It impacted buildings about 0.9 of a mile away from the airport, and it shows pictures of which we can see here on the screen, starting from the top there where it impacted with the tail, and then how it subsequently fell down. And they found these different pieces of the aircraft in these different locations, which is clearly marked out.
Yep.
There's not really anything interesting from a cause point of view in this. It just outlines exactly what the damages are, which these reports have to do. So the wreckage and impact continues after that. Obviously, horrific impact, both the people on the ground, this medical hotel that was impacted with people inside, horrific. But the only thing really that stood out to me when I looked through the report, when it came to the actual pictures and the crash information, was a picture of the APU inlet. What does that mean?
Well, it tells us, as we kind of discussed in previous lives that we've done on this, it tells us that the APU had started. So when the APU starts, the door opens. And when we say a door, you say, well, why has it got a door? Well, it's an air inlet door, because the APU is effectively a little jet engine right at the back of the aircraft that needs air coming in for it to burn and shoot out the back. But it's acting really as a generator and a source of electricity. But the fact that door is open, it would only be open when that APU is triggered to start.
Yep.
When it's shut down, it closes to be aerodynamically efficient. But once it started, that door opens, and the fact that it's crashed and ended up with that door open shows us that yes, the APU did start, as we discussed.
Yeah. So this is in line with what we've been talking about, right? Everything. The reason we're pointing these things out is because this official report is now pointing out more or less the same things.
Yeah.
The APU has started. It has likely auto-started because it wouldn't be running normally at this stage. So it has auto-started, which it does when it needs to provide power, together with the ram air turbine, the RAT.
Which has been confirmed, isn't it, now as deployed?
Which has also been confirmed to be deployed. So this is why I wanted to point it out. Now, the next thing that becomes really interesting is what they found inside of the cockpit.
Yes.
So this is going to answer a lot of the questions that I know you guys had about this. So if we start with, for example, the flap handle.
Yeah.
Because we in our very first live that we did on the day of the accident, we discussed different failures that we've seen people make in the simulator, right? Where people have been, for example, taking up the flaps instead of the gear, right? And this was a theory that was floated out a lot, and we were very clear with saying that we don't want to speculate at this point, but we've seen these kind of mistakes being made before, and the flap lever position was found in the 5 slot, right? I don't know if do we have a picture of that?
No, I don't think we do. We can show it in the sim in a moment, but we don't have a picture of that. But the point is that it's the correct position.
Yeah, it is. There is a picture of it in the final report, in the interim report, and it shows that it was sitting in the 5 slot, and the flight data recorder also showed that it was in the correct position. So it was in flaps 5, which was a standard takeoff setting. So this had nothing to do with the crash.
Nope.
Right.
Nope.
The next thing is the position of the gear lever. That one I do think we have a picture of.
Yeah.
There we go. Right. So this, as you can hopefully see, is in the down position.
Yeah, it's something we'd spoken about, Peter, haven't we, before? We've spoken about had it been raised and the hydraulics failed, or had it been left down. We spoke about that in some detail, but it's been confirmed now, hasn't it, that the gear lever was down.
It was down, right? They don't go into any discussion in this report whether or not it was raised and then put down again. But given the very quick kind of, the way that things happen here and the speed that everything happened with, I would guess that if it was actually if it was found in the down position, it probably was left down.
Yeah,
and that would indicate that all of those videos that showed that the boogie was tilted was wrong, as in like it was an optical illusion. It was seen from the wrong angle, and that was not the case. Right?
No.
Because if the gear was left down, it would not have started to start the retraction process. So this is actually a very, very good point. But this is one of the reasons why speculations is something that you should avoid, because it can make you look very bad. Like, as an expert, we can sit here and we can talk about things. We can base it on, basically data that has not been confirmed and that we can't verify. And in this case, it was wrong, right?
Yeah, it was. No matter how much you look at the different angles and the footage that you think you can see, it's grainy footage. The angles aren't great, and it just proves that no matter how convinced you can look at this and go, "Yeah, that was definitely down," it wasn't. Yeah.
So it's a great example of why, us armchair experts sitting and trying to figure this out, why we shouldn't be speculating. Because there's going to, once the official information comes out, there's going to be, basically we're going to see exactly what happened rather than having to guess about it. So,
yeah.
Right. So that was one thing. The next thing then that might be worth talking about is the fuel switches, right?
Big
one.
Yeah. This is the big one. This is what they found.
Yeah. And the fuel switches, which is what we talked about in the live stream that we did just a few days ago, when we heard through the air current that they were looking into the fuel switches. These were found in the run position, as in on. They were found in the run position, which they should have been.
Yes.
Okay. But here comes another little twist in this, and this is why it's so important to find the flight data recorders. Right?
Shall I go through the timestamps on this, or do you want to talk through it first?
No, we can get down to that once we get to the flight data recorders.
Okay.
Because it's really when we get to the very end of this report, when we come to the flight data recorders, that things start to get really interesting.
Yeah.
Right. And where we start to see really what might have caused this. But what you have to remember from here is that they were found in the run position. They were on. Right. The fuel switches were on after the impact. Apart from that, there's not much more from the actual impacts that we can learn from this report. In the final report, there's going to be, right? Like I said before, the interim report tends to be, between 10, sometimes it's even 3 pages, but can be up to 20 pages or 30 pages even. But the final report tends to be 200 pages, right? So much, much more information. So the last thing we want to go through before we get to the flight data recorder and what that said was the pilot experience. So we now know that they were both males, 56-year-old captain, 32-year-old first officer. First officer was pilot flying, as we mentioned in the beginning. The captain had 15,638.22 hours. 8,596 of those was flown on this particular type, so very experienced. The first officer had 3,403 hours and 1,128 on the type. So less experienced, but still what would be considered experienced. Well, I mean, not overly experienced when it comes to the first officer, but not inexperienced either.
No.
Then after that, they don't seem to have flown that much during the previous 30 days, 56 hours. You can fly much more than that. So once again, when we talk about fatigue and stuff, that was likely not an issue here.
Right.
Then we come to the comms, as in the communications, and the communications are not written out. So we don't have a transcript of the cockpit voice recorder and the ATC recordings. It just timestamps when they ask for pushback, start, taxi, and then the fact that there was a mayday call. So that's also been confirmed now. We just don't know exactly what the mayday call entailed.
Yeah.
Good. Now we get to the thing that is going to get a lot of attention in the press.
For sure. Sure.
So Ben, you want to take over and go through the timeline from the flight data recorder?
Yeah, and feel free to jump in at any point. So the aircraft taxied off to runway 23, as we knew, via Romeo 4, which was that intermediate holding position, and then it backtracked all the way down to the end of the runway. So it went the opposite way down, turned around, ready to take off. Takeoff clearance was issued at 08:07 and 33 seconds. And the aircraft started rolling at about 4 seconds later. So they didn't muck around, straight away, takeoff clearance, away they go, as we would normally do. Now, the aircraft accelerated down the runway and they crossed the decision speed of V1, which is the latest point that we could reject the takeoff from, and achieved that at 153 knots at 08:08 and 33 seconds. So accelerated normally in VR, which is the rotation speed, the speed at which they initiate the pitch up to climb away from the ground, at 155 knots, occurred literally a few seconds later.
Yeah. So, I mean,
completely normal.
Like you said, it's normal, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot of discussions out there whether or not they were overweight. They were not. That was also confirmed in this in this report that they were below the maximum takeoff weight, and that weight and balance seems to be okay.
Everything checks out.
Yeah. So they were doing a completely normal takeoff.
That's it. The aircraft then sensed. So the aircraft has an air-ground sensor, which tells the systems when it leaves the ground and when it's back on the ground for a huge amount of systems. And that sensed that it got airborne literally 4 seconds after it reached that VR speed, again, which is normal. It achieved the maximum recorded airspeed of 180 knots, and that was about 7 seconds later. And immediately thereafter, engine number 1 and engine number 2, fuel cutoff switches, transitioned from run to cutoff, and that's important.
Yeah.
And the time gap between both of these is 1 second, so it was done very quickly. It was shut off and shut off that quickly between the first and the second. And the engine N1, which is the fan speed at the front that you see, and the N2, which is the internal fan that you don't see, began to decrease from their takeoff thrust values, which is exactly what you would expect to happen. You've just shut those engines down. They just turn into giant windmills. So that happened immediately. Now, the interesting bit, Peter, wasn't it, was they mentioned in the report that in the cockpit voice recording, one of the pilots is heard asking the other pilot, why did he cut off the fuel switches? To which the other pilot responded that he did not do so.
So, right. So if we stop here, because obviously this is where all the discussion is going to be around. This means that the aircraft was working as it should.
Yeah.
Right. From what we can see here, providing that failure that we talked about earlier wasn't involved, which I think we can kind of disregard because, like you said, it happened within a second of each other. The risk that a failure of some sort would happen to both switches at exactly the same time is nil.
And I also think on that fact that they say at the end that at this stage of the investigation, there's no recommended actions to the 7878 or G engines.
Yeah. So what we can take from that, and this is the reason, like we mentioned in our last live stream, that there has been nothing has happened to the 787 fleet. The global fleet has just been flying like normal, even though they clearly had this information longer than what we know about it. So the aircraft probably did exactly what it was supposed to. Right? It was told to shut down the engines. It shut down the engines.
Correct.
That's it. Now, the question obviously then becomes why? Why? Why would this happen? And we will not know this likely ever completely, but in the final report there's going to be much more digging into this, right? There's probably a lot of investigation going on right now when it comes to human factors.
Yeah.
The fact that one of them said, why did you cut them off, and the other one said, I didn't, right? It can mean a lot of different things.
And also, was there somebody else in the cockpit that we don't know about at this stage? There's lots of unanswered questions.
Yeah, but yes, but I think, right, this is my own thinking. If that was the case, the cockpit voice recording would sound different.
True.
Right. It wouldn't be. The pilot wouldn't be asking the colleague, "Why did you do that?" Because
True.
it would be a possibility that someone else did it. It would be a different discussion. But we don't know. We'll have to wait to confirm that there was no one else in the cockpit.
True.
It's not mentioned, and I have a feeling that if there was another person in the cockpit, it would definitely be mentioned.
Yeah, you're right. Most likely.
Yeah. So I think we can assume that there's two pilots in here, and in that they're talking to each other. Now, it's very hard to explain why you would cut the fuel, right? There's also discussion. Something that was not said in the report was who was saying this, right? Yeah. There's no mention. It's just that a pilot said this, and the other pilot said the other. So we don't know if it was the captain or the first officer. And here I'll go out a little bit on a limb. What I know from my own experience is that when you're flying, right, you're very concentrated on takeoff, and what we can see is that this is a normal takeoff, and the takeoff is done manually. So one of these pilots, the first officer, was flying, and the captain was not. The captain was monitoring.
Yeah.
Right. So if I would deduce from that, I'm going to guess that it was probably the first officer who asked. Like what happened? Because you're looking out and you're flying, and all of a sudden you feel that you lose trust. Yeah. So it would make sense that the pilot flying, but it could also be the other way around.
Yeah, it could be. And if we can jump in the SimPad to kind of again just to show that perspective of where we're looking and where we are when we're kind of doing this. So if I just jump in there now, so obviously this is the captain's view who'll be pilot monitoring, and this is where the fuel cutoff or fuel control switches are. They're not in your primary field of view.
No.
This I know that obviously the sim is two-dimensional, but you're not looking down here and you're focusing out the window or on your instruments as you rotate here. So it's not something that you'd necessarily notice them go and do from either side. But it would be a very deliberate action. It's not something, as we discussed the other day, it's not something that could be done accidentally.
No, and it's good to point out here that the way that cockpits are designed is that everything that you need should be in your field of view. Right? Like you should have everything you need in terms of instrumentation, for example. You know, the buttons for the autopilot panel. All of that is in your direct field of vision. But everything else that you don't really need immediately is going to be, for example, on your overhead panel or on your center pedal and behind. So that what we're saying is absolutely correct. Like you wouldn't, when you're looking out now and you're rotating and you're flying, you will not be looking essentially behind you and down to the right or down to the left if you're the first officer.
No. In your peripheral vision, you might see an unusual movement, because what we would be expecting as soon as we get airborne is for pilot monitoring to reach over and raise the landing gear.
Yeah.
Which we found, we now know was down, but that's where it would be. So they would reach forward for that. But that's the only thing you might notice that was different.
Yep. And I mean, the fact is that after that, once the fuel switches were turned off and this conversation had happened, the fuel switches were then brought back up again, right? Brought back up to run. So whoever did, again, that's not confirmed. Neither can it be, because we don't have any cameras in the cockpit, so we won't be able to see who did what. But we do know that these fuel switches that had been cut off, which is what caused the dual engine failure, was then brought back up again. And why would you do that, Ben?
In an attempt to bring these engines back to life. So by opening those, we're going to open up the fuel valves again. We're going to start the igniters to ignite that fuel, which from what we can see did begin to happen. From the initial reports, we can see that the engines did actually begin to reignite, begin to start spooling up. But it's a slow process. It doesn't happen quickly. It's not like a propeller engine where it just suddenly fires up. Jet engines take a while to spool up. So it happens so close to the ground that even though they went, these start levers or the fuel control switches got moved back to run, and the fuel got sent to the engines and it got ignited and it started spooling up, it still wasn't producing enough thrust for a maximum takeoff weight aircraft to climb away safely from the ground, unfortunately.
No, and that's worth pointing out here, that even though they were below the maximum takeoff weight, it was a hot day. It was warm outside. They were heavy, and they were only at around 400 feet or so when this happened. So the engines had time to start spooling down, and then it takes a while for them to relight again, which you said, which you pointed out that they did. At least the left engine, I think, started accelerating.
Yeah.
But it would have been, they would have needed another couple of seconds for this to come back up again.
Yeah. I mean, crucially with jet engines, the spool up time from an idle thrust is very, very long. It can take 10 seconds to go from an idle thrust setting all the way to take off. So even if they had relit and they got to idle, it's not an instantaneous, right, we're climbing away now. It's going to take time. And all that time, they're losing altitude, unfortunately.
Yeah. So whatever happened in this cockpit, right? When we can't speculate on exactly what happened. It could be it could be the brain fart of the century. It could be deliberate. It could be. The only thing we do know is that these fuel switches were definitely moved to off. That was the initiation of the whole sequence. This is why the ram air turbine came out, which a lot of people have observed and heard on those videos and correctly saw. So there was pictures as well in the report here showing the ram air turbine. So that was definitely confirmed, and that is also what started up the APU.
Yeah.
Right? So we know that the fuel switches were moved for whatever reason to off, and then they were moved back up again, and they were left there, right? So it doesn't seem to have been any struggle of putting them back down again or something like that. So we know that much, and that's really all that we can say at this point. We will see with the final report, which is now going to come in maybe a year and a half. There might be some updates coming further as well, but I doubt it. This is a very, very detailed interim report.
Yeah.
So if this would have been something that they still didn't know, you can expect updates to come right? Like we figured out this, so we found this, or whatever. But the fact that they don't recommend any action for Boeing and that they found this just means that, yeah, you know, the switches were turned off. The aircraft did what it should do, and unfortunately, this happened.
Yeah, and obviously what they will be looking into is the background of each of the pilots, which is what we learned from the German wings incident. There was a very thorough investigation into each of the pilots' background, which is obviously going to come out in the final report.
For sure.
But that's where attention will be focused for sure.
Yeah, this is extremely sad, and it's going to be there's going to be continuing to be a lot of discussions about this over the next 2 years or so. But I think with this, at least what I will take away from this is that I will have no problem flying on a 787.
Yeah, me too.
Right, the Boeing, you know, the aircraft did what it was supposed to do, and there's nothing wrong with it from what we can see here. No. So with that in mind, given that it's 12:30 here, I was about to go to bed when this interim report came out. I think we can take some questions.
Yeah.
And then what we will do now that we have the interim report is that we will produce a much more thorough Mentor Now video, which will show you what we know. Right, it's going to come out as soon as we can possibly produce it. But we wanted to go through this report together with you and explain what we can read in it. You can be absolutely sure that there's going to be a lot of discussions about this on other YouTube channels, but also in the press. You know, if you have questions, file them away.
Yeah, people are asking where can we get the interim report. We'll put a link in the description below for you there.
Yeah, I opened it up again when I got into the studio, and it took a while to load. Right, it's a lot of pressure on the website, so don't be surprised if you maybe can't even access it now, because there's probably hundreds of thousands of people trying to open this thing.
So there's a question here from Ryan Pedder who's saying, is a breath test standard? Which is a good question.
No, it's not.
Certainly not in Europe that I know of.
No, I know that I've read a lot of incident or accident reports in Russia, and there it seems like they have some kind of pre-flight medical that they do, and I'm not sure if that includes breathalyzer tests. From what this report shows, it looks like it could be standard in India, but it's definitely not in the rest of the world. But I know that we are subject to these spot tests. They could come out and do a breathalyzer test.
Yeah, I've had one
at any given time. Yeah, and the same goes with drugs. They check for drugs, and sometimes they come into the crew room and they take some hair and they check for drugs. Right, so they do.
Yeah, I had one once where they actually took about a pencil width of hair from everybody on all the crew, and it shows all the way back forever, however long that hair has been on your head. So yeah, it's pretty thorough. Yeah,
exactly. I'm seeing a lot of comments here about that this is a Boeing cover-up, yada yada yada. This is a report that comes out of the Indian authorities, right? And they have been working together with both the FAA, the NTSB, Boeing, General Electric. All of these have been working together. You cannot, no. Like I get tired and angry when I hear conspiracy theories, and I don't want it to be something that people goes out and think, well, maybe there's a possibility there's a cover up here. There's not cover-ups everywhere, which seems to be something that is in the popular culture right now, that everyone thinks that everything is a cover-up.
No. Let's have a look. Let's look. So there's a question here. Do we know how long in seconds the fuel switches were in cutoff since they had time to spool down? I was just trying to do the maths in my head here. It said, I was just looking at the numbers. So they reached a maximum speed of 180 knots at 08:08:42 seconds, and immediately thereafter the engines were moved to cutoff, and they were moved back to run at 52 seconds. So less than 10 seconds. I would say 8 or 9 seconds, which is significant. It's a significant amount of time for those to spool down.
Yeah. That's 10 seconds is definitely enough for it to go back so far that it's going to take a while to start. That's the thing as well. The bigger the engines, the longer it might take for them to accelerate once they have started to slow down. Yeah. So that's enough for sure.
Yeah. What else we got on here? Harris Maynor is saying, how could the report fail to state whether the switches, when found, the locking mechanism worked or not? Well, I mean, just to be clear what the locking mechanism, just to kind of, I mean, they're not locked in position. Let's just get that out of the way, because the 737, the newer variants of that, the MAX, the 78, the 777, I think it's even the same part number. They share the very, very similar, at least, fuel control switches. And they're not locked in the sense that you can't move them, because we may have to move them in flight, if we were going to shut down an engine. But what they do, they have like a detent. So as we showed in the previous live, is we have to pull them out of the detent, which is kind of like the lock and then moves. So it's not something that can kind of break as such, as far as I understand it. It's just a detent that needs to be moved past in order. So it's a deliberate action to shut them off.
Yeah.
So it's not something that would not work in that sense.
No, and that's the thing. I mean, this is where that part of the report becomes a little bit troublesome, because it brings that up as a possibility, even though I mean, if it was actually something that was dangerous, then it would have been highlighted as dangerous, and it would have been inspected and fixed accordingly. But it wasn't. So I don't really understand that part, to be perfectly honest. And we will probably learn more about it. Now, I see a question here from Seb VDS, who says, the flight data recorder states that the fuel cutoff switch is in the off position. However, the cutoff panel was found in the running position. Unless I got it wrong, it doesn't add up. Do you agree? This is what we said, right? They were found in the on position because someone, the way that it's written in the report is that one of the pilots turned them off, and then they were turned back on again, and that's why they were found in the run, in the on position on the in the crash. So yes, it does add up.
And the couple of questions here. So Cyprian, order of switches turned off, left to right, or vice versa? That's interesting. I think I know where you're coming from with that question, actually. And the answer is, from what I can see on the report, the engines 1 and 2. So it's left engine, then right engine. But that's the way it's written in the report. I'm guessing the reason you're asking that is people are likely to go to the nearest start-off. When you're shutting down an engine, are you going to the nearest fuel shut-off switch first?
Yeah.
I know where you're coming from with that. But yeah, it was left to right.
Impossible to say also. That might be the obvious thing when you're sitting like this, but it might not be. No. So there's a lot of questions, as I understand here, whether or not this could still be a technical failure. As in, like, is there still any room for technical failure in here? And we cannot say no to that. As in, like, this is why we wait for a final report in order before we give the final conclusion. But the fact that these fuel switches were moved from run to off within a second of each other, and then brought back up again to run, that's deliberate action. It's not something in, like, if it was a system failure inside of the switch, for example, then you wouldn't be able to bring it back up to run again, not that quickly. So the fuel switches have been working as designed, and apart from them falling down at the same time, both of them, due to some kind of failure with the lock notch, which is, like I said, I don't know. There's probably some smart people out there that can count on the probability for that. But given that it's never happened before.
Yeah, and kind of on that same note, there's a question here from the Legacy saying, what's the chances of one of the pilots dropping something on the switches by accident or accidentally hitting them while throttling back? No chance. Not particularly not at that phase of flight when we're literally rotating and getting airborne out. Your hands aren't. And the point to note here as well is that when we get to V1, we move our hand away from the thrust lever. And it's a deliberate move. So we go V1, hand comes away, both hands on the control column, so that there is no accidental movement of the thrust lever from that point onwards. Because whatever problem we have, we've got to take it into the air. So but it's a human factors element there that we move it away. So no hands should be anywhere near that. And we're not holding anything. So there's nothing to be dropped. And they have the locking device. So yeah, I would say no.
So there's a lot of questions as well that I see here from several people. It's like, why are there no cameras in the cockpit? And as it so happens, on Monday we are releasing a video about that.
Yeah.
Right. Which had nothing to do with this incident. It's a question that comes up very, very often. That both why there's no cameras in the cockpit, but also why there's no cameras outside. So we decided to make a thorough video about the reasons behind that, basically, and it's coming out on Monday on Mentor now. So stay tuned for that.
Good. Any other questions you can pick up there from your side, Peter?
No, like it's just talking about this. So did the report state that the engines were fully functioning before the cutoff switch was moved? That's from Cynthia Sullivan. So no checklist being done because of an engine failure, which is a great question actually, because you would always have the chance, for example, which has happened previously, that one engine fails and then the other one is cut off by mistake.
Yeah.
Right. That was kind of what I was. I'm not going to say hoping for, but I mean that would at least been just a human error that we've seen happen before without any malice involved. Yeah. But no, there's nothing in this report that states there was anything wrong with these engines until the fuel switches were turned off.
No, they were working as they should. And let's have a look on here. Dan saying, if you notice the fuel switches are cut off at such a critical phase, he's asking the question here, would you still be asking, why did you do that? Or would you just not immediately rectify the situation?
The shock, it's startle. Yeah. You have to realize startle is a very, very strong thing. So you don't, even though the logical thing would be just to fix it and then ask a question, the very first thing that would come to your mind would be, but why? What are you doing? Why did you do that?
Yeah.
So for me it makes sense. Tragic as it is.
Yeah, and when you factor that in with the physical sensations that we spoke about a couple of days ago, with that deceleration, that sinking feeling, it's just sensory overload. It's the worst nightmare, isn't it? So yeah, logic goes out the window. Anything else from your side?
Paul is putting me up against the fence here and saying, are you saying that the chance of switches moving without human input is zero? No, I would say that it was probably 0.0 and then 9 zeros and then a 1. Yeah. So I'm not saying that it's a zero chance, but I'm saying that it is extremely unlikely.
For sure.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything. I see there's quite a lot of super chats here, which we really, really do appreciate because it really helps the channel. I'll see if I can pick some of them up. So Marcin Kowalczyk is asking, does moving the switches to cutoff generate a master warning alarm in the cockpit?
Yeah. You get lots of alarms.
Yeah.
Because you'd be getting caution alerts, because remember, when you shut down the engines, a lot of the systems are all shutting down with them because they depend on the electricity being supplied by the engines. So suddenly all of the alerts are going to be lighting up like a Christmas tree.
Yeah, Bottom Fragger is asking, why does it make sense to allow the fuel switches to be moved to cutoff when the engine isn't in idle? That is a pretty good question.
It is a good question. I'm just trying to think of a reason why. I mean, the only time I've never heard of a stuck thrust lever. Have you? Where you'd have to shut it down because the thrust lever is physically.
There's been some incidents of that. Yeah, there's been incidents of maybe not the thrust lever being stuck, but the engine being stuck at higher thrust settings. So
I've seen that.
I now I'm going out on a limb here, but I think in the back of my head I have something about Embraer having a system similar to that, where the thrust lever has to be in idle in order for you to cut up. Otherwise, it's kind of blocked. Which
does make sense.
It does make sense.
Yeah.
Right. I don't. Yeah, this is a good idea. I don't. Yeah. I don't see any. I can't, like, off the top of my head at 1 o'clock in the morning. I can't come up with a good reason why that wouldn't work.
No.
But this is why we have engineers to build our aircraft and not tired pilots.
But good question.
Very, very good question.
Yeah.
I really like that. Let's see if I can find any more, because I saw that there was a few popping up. But there's so many comments that I don't really have time to capture them all. Is there anything else you want to add, Ben, to this?
No, just one other thing on here. Abin is asking here, cyber attack ? Aircraft remotely controlled. There's no way that the aircraft can be remotely controlled. Just to put any kind of concerns to rest there. There's no kind of direct link to any of the controls on the aircraft from the ground.
No.
So that's not.
That is part of the point why, when we've been talking about, for example, AI co-pilots and things like that, unless it's a system that that can be housed inside of the aircraft without any external links, it poses a lot of cyber risks, right? Anytime that you have to have some kind of uplink that can input on the aircraft, that would be a nightmare from a cybersecurity point of view. So at the moment, you should see the way that the system. I don't know how the 787 is updated when it comes to like software, but I mean the 747 uses floppy disks still. Those the old floppy disks. And I remember on the 737 they come up with this huge bulky computer and they chug it in and then they do the update from there. But there's no there's no Wi-Fi updating or anything like that. It's not like a Tesla or an Audi that does that. Yeah. Now, KFJ990 is asking a very pointed question here, which is, if this was deliberate, how can it be prevented in the future? So, I mean, there is no good answer to this.
It's a big question.
This is the question.
Yeah.
Right. The question. And I've been struggling a lot with how to explain this through my channels, because obviously pilots are human. They will suffer from the same type of issues that everyone else suffers from, especially when it comes to mental health. We are being checked for that annually. There are checks that have come in, especially after the German Wings disaster. But there's also, you have to be very, very careful with how you implement new rules around this, because what you don't want is to start. I mean, I understand that the public perception would be like, I just want superhumans in the cockpit, like people that cannot have any type of issues. Those are the ones that are flying the planes. Anyone who has type of issues cannot fly the planes. But what you get then is you get a culture where any problems that anyone would feel would be driven underground.
Yeah.
Like no one would ever speak up if they feel like, oh, I'm actually not feeling a bit depressed, I shouldn't be flying, because that might end your career. Right. So what you have done is a much bigger problem that gets shoved underground, causing even more problems. So there's no good answer to this. Well, the answer is that we do recruitment, we do background checks, we do all of these things before someone can become a pilot. And after that, they are continuously evaluated through simulator checks, through medical checks. Background checks continues to be a thing. And we just have to assume, we just have to trust that the people that go through this feel okay and that they speak up if they don't. Yeah. Right? There's no good. It's the same with anything that operates big machinery or does anything.
You can never eliminate the human factor side of it, can you? But there has been real positive steps with things such as peer support programs being implemented by airlines, which are confidential from management. So if you can go to that peer support program, you can address your problems. There'll be a lot of support in there. It doesn't have any impact on your job or your career, but it's being addressed in the correct way. There's been big steps taken in that direction.
That's the way that I would like to see it. To see, basically, like, instead of being less human, become more human.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Give more support. Let pilots know, and cabin crew and everyone is working in there, that it's okay if you don't feel right, if you might be going through a divorce or have financial difficulties. Who knows? So you have all of these stresses that happens to everyone at any given time. And if that happens to you, you should be able to speak up and say, listen, I don't feel like this. I don't feel good now. And then you should be just taken off the line until you feel better. Maybe be in connection with an AME, as an aeromedical examiner, who can then recertify you back. But it should be a very straightforward process, not something that is hard or involves a lot of paperwork, because if it does, people will, like I said, just hide it.
Yeah.
It's the human way.
Yeah.
So Nilesh Taylor is asking, can you elaborate on the FAA and faulty locking mechanisms of the fuel switch? Does that hold any weight to this? So I can't, because it's in here, right? Because that informational bulletin exists. But I was flying when this bulletin came out. It never made any waves. No one, I've never heard of it before, to be honest. And that probably is because it didn't have any safety. There was no safety concerns from the FAA when they issued it.
I don't know. I can't shed any more light on that. I've never seen anything on that from my side either. So
No.
whether it was certain part numbers that didn't affect us, I don't know, but it's obviously very insignificant, the fact that neither of us have heard of it.
Yeah, and the fact that there was no there was no mandatory no mandatory checks even. They're like, yeah, well, you can go and check this out if you feel like it, but you don't have to. You know, that kind of says everything.
Yeah.
So Lily White's from India. If the switches got flipped, then surely the conversation between the pilots would have been really intensive, aggressive, and telling. Only including 2 sentences from them in the report is weird.
No.
Not necessarily.
No. We, again, as you mentioned, Petter, I think surprise, startle, the pure focus on what you're doing and what you're going through. You're not, when we're talking here about it, everything's happening in slow motion. We're relaxed, whatever. But when you're in that scenario, the fight or flight kicks in, and you're trying to survive. And things like conversations go out the window. You might ask a question for sure. Then you're going to do something about it, which is what they did. And then that's about as far as it will probably go.
Yeah, no, it's not the time to start arguing. But the thing here is that we don't hear the intonation. We don't hear how they were screaming or whatever. It's not indicated in the report, and neither can it be really. I mean, if this becomes a human factor thing, and they go into the background of each pilot and they find something, then we'll probably read more about it in the final report.
Yeah.
Philip Rosil is asking as a super chat as well. Thanks again. Would a possible future technical response to this be an inability to move those switches until reaching a certain altitude or speed? We kind of talked about that already. No, like we said, if anything, you can maybe connect it to the thrust lever position, but that would be a major recertification thing.
Yeah, it would be similar to how the thrust reversers work, in the sense that the thrust has to be idle before you can deploy the thrust reversers. But that'd be a huge undertaking.
Yeah. No, we're talking major recertification. In this case, it's not going to be found to be needed. Right? That's the thing. We have to, as pilots, be able to move the switches in the cockpit. I've seen a lot of questions from our previous video, which is like, how can you have these switches, which is basically turning off the engines? Just there. Why are they even allowed to be there? Shouldn't they be like blocked or something?
Yeah.
And it's a great question, and I completely understand it. But what you have to understand is that we have to be able to move basically all the different levers in the cockpit, because they do form part of different non-normal checklists that, in this case, even are involved in memory items, stuff that you need to be able to do from memory and quickly because they are crucial.
Yeah. And in a sense that if you had an engine fire, if they suffered an engine fire just as they got airborne, what they're going to need to do is starve that engine of fuel to put the fire out. So we don't want those levers away from reach, because then it can have the other side effect where they can't put a fire out. But as we mentioned in the previous video, there's a very strict protocol that we follow when we're touching these levers in flight. It's very deliberate, cross-check with both crew, but they do need to be available and accessible.
Yeah. And with that, we have another super chat from user saying, love the work you guys are doing. First place, I come to go for an incredible info on any incident now. Well, thank you. I mean, we are like, this is the reason that we're sitting here now in the middle of the night and talking about this, because we know that there's a lot of people with a lot of questions out there. And we hope that whatever little information with our background that we can give is helpful. If not, we wouldn't be doing it. So I hope you guys get something out of it, and we would love to get as much feedback as possible to what we could improve. If there's anything else that you want us to do, because we really are here to help.
Yeah, for sure.
Good. And with that, I think we've kind of gotten to the end of this. Like I said, we will be following up with videos that includes much more information. But for now, I don't know, Ben, do you have any last words that you want to add?
No, I think it's time for bed.
It is, and of course, my thoughts continues to go out to the families of the victims and everyone that's involved in this horrible crash. And this will not help. I think it's just gonna open up even more questions. But at least we now know that from what we can see and read from this report, the aircraft is safe. Yeah. So it doesn't make it any better, but
no,
at least we know more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with that, thank you very much for watching, everyone out there. And have a good continuation of the day. I'm going to go to bed.
Have a good night, everybody. Take care.
Good night.